The Sleeping Sabbath is a week-long festival celebrated by the citizens of Carrollton, Virginia. Being a small settlement and rural community nestled on a swampy and untamed Atlantic coast, not many outsiders know of the week's activities, or even of its existence. Considering the tiny municipality rarely has any visitors or outwardly presence, the carnival brings surprisingly large amounts of participants. Starting every first week of the month of June and ending that Sunday, all of the inhabitants of that town participate. It's the highlight of the year for its people and the carnivalesque party. The week turns the small two-road town into a huge collection of booths, tents, concerts, and each night ends with an amazing fireworks display. Even the youngest of children come and help put things together. Face painting seemed to be the bestseller last year, as the town's resident artist and historian Gregory Seltzer decided that showing his latest batch of paintings and sculptures wouldn't be nearly as exciting for the influx of children. All in all, it isn't very different from an average small-town establishment festival, and all in all, it wouldn't be much to discuss if the last night of the festival wasn't so abnormal. The celebration goes literally all night and into the next morning. And generally things die down and slow at around 3:30 a.m. each night. There's the unspoken sober sunup, where the adults refrain from drinking or other recreational substance use until the next nightfall. During that time, though, none of the townspeople sleep. The children are generally excused from this part of the ordeal, but it's of grave importance that the majority of the town keep each other up and active, not sleeping more than half an hour at most. The overly tired residents abstain from sleep until Saturday night at exactly 12 a.m., when all the celebratory parts of the week are ended, and every person in the town finds their way home and falls deep asleep. Hence the name Sleeping Sabbath. The whole community finds itself to bed and sleeps for the entire day, only to awake that next Monday and make their way to another year. I lived in Carrollton my whole life. Like the rest of the lifers, I loved that week. As a kid, I remember loving it even more than Christmas even. The whole town was just abuzz with activity, and everyone was smiling and having fun. My grandfather would take me around to show off his grandest grandson. I had my first kiss during a concert at my 13th festival. I spent my whole life waiting on those 7 days each year. The smallest town in the world was a nightmare of boring until that week. I don't think anyone could imagine just how amazing it was. When I turned 21 in 2002, I landed a small job for the local newspaper. I was now the Carrollton Gazette's own reporter, Richard Danson. And like most of us at that young age, I had aspirations to move my little town out of the dark ages and push it in a more progressive front forward. Honestly, I was proud of the accomplishments I had. We didn't have internet or cell phones, considering just how far away we were from the rest of the civilized world. So, through research and pure determination, I decided I'd bring the rest of the world to the town. I think my proudest moment was seeing our only store selling actual CDs of modern music from the outside. I was able to create just enough buzz in the paper that the local high school kids, all 14 of them, decided they absolutely had to have access to something worth listening to. But I'm not writing all this to explain how out of touch my little hometown was. I'm writing this to warn the rest of the world of the irrevocable damage I caused with my own arrogance and stupidity. I had a craving for knowledge, and the one unspoken unknown that had always intrigued me was the same question that most of you probably have. Where the hell did this festival come from? As I got older and older, I was given permission to leave the town, in certain capacities at least, and I started to dig a bit deeper. I found out Carrollton was established by a small religious sect known as the Black Book Jesuits, founded by a man named John Carrollton. he took his few followers and developed 3 different communities all over Virginia, shortly after the Revolutionary War. During that time, the 2 other settlements called for their own independence from the church, but our little abode stayed the mainstay for the truly devout of the movement, and the town grew little by little over the course of time. Little remains of the actual religious beliefs of the Jesuits. In fact, so little is known or recorded that I had to piece together what I do know through word of mouth, that it was in fact an offshoot of Calvinistic Christianity. The modern townspeople split off after John's death and began to nearly all adopt normal Southern Baptist practices brought from an outsider in the early 1800s. And after that, all that was known about the old religious ways was the festival. And if there's any indicating what the founded practices were, most of the people were more than happy to keep only a week-long county-wide party. That seemed to satiate my craving for some time, but I could still feel that a piece was missing. It wasn't until I started working for the paper and getting opportunities to visit the surrounding cities that I realized there were more than a few unorthodox idiosyncrasies about Carrollton. And the first one being that legally, no one was allowed to leave without the permission of the mayor. I must emphasize that I never felt forced to do anything in that town. I followed the rules like anyone else would, and it was a very normal life. There was no violent or sexual abuse. All of us were allowed to think of different things and for ourselves. I never at all felt as though I was being controlled by a cult or something. I mean, we had elections and different denominations of churches. People were allowed to do just about anything they pleased, as long as it didn't hurt someone else at least. So when the local law stated that we had to stay in our town for our own good, no one really argued or questioned against it. The second rule, and what started this whole descent into this particular situation I'm in, was that all of our residents had to sleep the whole span of the Sunday of the sleeping Sabbath of the celebration. We were all even given sedatives in our mailboxes that would let us all sleep peacefully and soundly throughout the day. Again, when everything else in my town followed the rules of normal United States law, I never expected this would be considered anything other than completely normal. We never thought of it as odd that we would give our children a hypnotic, because we always had, and always would. I imagine you think of us differently now, and that's okay. I don't really expect you to understand it. There's a lot about your world that won't make sense to me either, but that gut horror you're probably feeling now is there for a reason. The main town that I would visit for outsider information was a small native reservation in itself. I loved it there. The people were just as nice and friendly as the ones from my town. I generally spent the majority of my time in their library, developing a pretty good relationship between the librarian and myself. We eventually became close enough that I felt comfortable talking to him about our customs. His reaction was more than a little worried. After a lengthy discussion about the ethics of drugging an entire village to help them sleep, I picked up on the disconcerting issue of the sleeping Sabbath, and with that seed planted into my worries, I made the decision that the next festival, I would keep myself awake and see just what exactly was happening during that 24-hour period of sleep. That festival was normal in every sense of the word. I kept to myself, did my own thing, played the carnival games and skee-ball like I always had. I decided it was best to keep away from the booze just in case, and used the excuse of a fake courtship with a young woman to go home and sleep unlike the others. The anxiety of having to hide it, though, kept me from sleeping too long, which helped hide the initial fact of what I was planning. If I was to find out what exactly happens during the day, no one needed to know that I was going to find out. I had loved and trusted my peers and family my whole life, but this uncomfortable feeling in my gut made it all but impossible to trust anyone. Saturday night came by and the carnival packed up, like a finely tuned machine. One by one, everyone disappeared back into their homes. Eventually, I too had to make my way to my mother and father's spare room, the one overlooking the town center, where I would most likely be able to witness any malicious activity, if there were any. I watched Mom and Dad drift to sleep, and made my way to the room. The overbearing suspicion and paranoia made me extra cautious to make sure I was in no way thought to be awake. I flushed the sedative pills down the toilet, laid down in bed, and waited. I didn't open my phone, didn't look at my watch. I just waited there with my eyes closed. It was a dumb mistake, because as most carelessness invokes, I myself fell asleep. I went right to bed. The one job I had given myself, I had failed at almost immediately. I'm not sure the time exactly, but the sun was up when the crashing was heard. It was in the living room of the house, assumingly close to the TV. I felt panic rush over me, and I found myself trying to think of any excuse for the crashing. Was one of my mother's 1,000 little trinkets just balanced slightly wrong? Did the 32-inch TV become too heavy for my dad's shoddy engineering and fall off the wall mount? Surely it had to be that they had gotten a new cat after Whiskers had died all those years ago. I was bouncing through the cautionary skeptic reactions when the crashing became louder, this time like broken glass. There wasn't a way for me to explain it off. Someone was breaking things in the house, and it was obviously getting closer. I had to find out who, and possibly protect my parents. I got out of bed as quietly as I could, reminding me of my youth, when I would wake up to sneak out and visit my friends. Each footstep on the carpeted floor sounded like an earthquake to me. Each time I would stop for a few moments and just listen. I got into the hallway when the crashing changed. The sounds morphed into this sickly, slimy noise, something I couldn't possibly fathom or comprehend. It was wet, and whatever it was sludgy. Whoever the intruder was, they must have just recently come out of the ocean. My fear was replaced by anger. How dare they take advantage of the celebration my town had done for hundreds of years? How dare these people steal and harm from my family? How dare they use this magical and wonderful time we all held so dear to break into our homes and do God knows what to all of us? I walked more carelessly, stumbled into the bathroom, and pulled the shower curtain rod down. I wanted whoever this was to hear. I wanted them to lose the comfort of silence. I was ready to make them pay for coming into our homes during our celebration and tainting our most vulnerable times. The footsteps stopped. I stopped. They knew I was awake, and I wanted to take advantage of that confusion the best I could. I barreled out of the bathroom and down the hallway, holding the curtain rod like a baseball bat. I started to scream a rattling cry of rage, and I turned the corner and made my way into the living room. The adrenaline pumping through me, making me invincible. I was going to fuck this guy's life up. I heard the wet footsteps scurry like running. I opened my eyes from screaming, looking to where I was going to swing. And then, I saw it. My rage drained from my body, with urine now running down my leg. The sight of what was in the doorway created a dread I couldn't describe in words if I wanted to. I felt a primordial hopelessness and terror that petrified my whole body. It left me cold and unable to move. This thing was upright on 3 legs, taller than any human being would ever be able to stand. It had a strange jelliness to it, like a balloon or a sack full of water. Its skin was black, that enveloped all light around it, only pieces of it shimmering from the daylight seeping from behind it. Its head was covered in red and piercing eyes, and for a mouth, there was only a row of lipless teeth. Within its arms it held a broken ceramic angel from my mother's shelves of decoration. It stood in what I can only assume was as much confusion as my own. I wept a little, as a gentle horrified rattle escaped my throat, and I fell to my knees in dread. I was going to die. It was going to end, all because of my carelessness and curiosity. Time passed by in ways I can't even imagine, but eventually, the thing turned and walked away from the house. Walking fluidly, it simply left me to sit in my own urine in confusion, my body trembling as I fought in my mind to regain control. Once I was finally away from the pure shock, I dragged myself out of the house through the still open door, dragging myself away with no intent or purpose on why. Crawling through the grass, I looked up across the lawn. And there were more. There were hundreds more. These creatures dragging wriggly, bloody messes across the yards and towards what I could only imagine was the ocean off in the distance. I cried in agony. My mind couldn't handle it anymore, and all at once, the thousands of them turned and looked at me in unison. At that point, I could no longer handle my actions. I no longer could think. All I could do was watch. The closest one to me in the neighbor's yard mumbled something in a language no human could understand, and the rest of the crowd of creatures mumbled back. There was a pause, and the first one walked closer to me. It was making that strange, squishy noise as it held up the thing it was holding, what all of them were holding, as if to show me in the simplest way it knew. There in its tentacles, arms, was a writhing mass of black, little red dots going in and out, and teeth gnashing up and down. It was bleeding from the teeth, and dripping with dark, oozy fluids that moved in ways that shouldn't be possible. The tall creature moving it closer to my face, I picked up a vile and coppery smell, like viscera that had recently been swept off a slaughterhouse floor, and as the insanity caused by my fear dripped out of my eyes, I finally realized just what it was showing me. It was showing me an infant. The crowd of creatures that had invaded my sleeping town were all holding the babies of their own kind, cradling them like a mother would after having delivered their own womb. As I muttered in understanding, the thing presenting its child to me turned and walked away. They all turned and followed suit, carrying their children off into the distance, until at last they were all gone. I was left sitting on the lawn in complete shock. Finally succumbing to the trauma I endured, I passed out in the grass. I slept for a week according to my parents. They found me on the lawn and assumed that in a sleepwalking incident I had found my way around the living room, knocking over her angel, then heading to the yard where it finally stopped. I was in no position to talk for several weeks, doctors concluding I must have hit my head hard while sleepwalking, so there in the guest bed, I stayed until now. In that time, I've recovered from that night. I've been under the care of my mother and father. As Dad goes to work, I spend the days with my mom knitting and talking to me. In the course of the weeks I've been bedridden and silent, I've watched her stomach extend and herself get sicker. I've watched my father having to vomit in the morning and refusing to eat from heartburn. I've watched them both bloat out and their bellies get bigger despite the lack of food they've had. And I've watched as the stress of their son possibly always being this way has made them irritable and fight. I taught myself how to feed myself again, and despite my inability to walk, I can still use my hands and arms, hence why I type this now. I've also had time to think on that incident. I've had time to ponder on what truly happened that sleeping Sabbath. Each of those creatures walked out of houses and buildings with babies of their own breed, each house having several of them, each house except for mine, because I scared away our creature. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. As always, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any criticisms on how I can make the videos better, or any thoughts about it in general, please be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. As well, in the description below the video, there will be links to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, Twitter, and Twitch accounts. If you guys want to chat, please be sure to send me a message on any of those. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Please be forewarned, though, that I tend to go on Facebook less than the others, so it may take me a little bit longer to respond to you. If you want to send in a story, or you have a story that you'd like to be read, please be sure to take a look at the description and send me a message on any one of those sites. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include the name of the story if it has one, the theme of the story if it has one as well, and how you would like to be credited in the video the story appears in, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. And please be sure to include as much detail as you are comfortable with, and make sure to follow proper grammar, at least a little bit. That way it will be easier for me to read, and it will also be long enough to put into a video. If you guys are curious about the music used in the video, it's always listed in the description in the order which it appears, and I have links to the artists as well. I usually use Doblato Studios and Miyuji, so that's usually what you're going to find there. If you're curious about the art in the video, my art guy Alan always does all of my art for the channel. He's a very good friend of mine, and I have links to all of his social media as well, so if you like his stuff, be sure to check him out. He does commissions as well, I'm pretty sure, so if you like it, you can definitely get some good quality products from him. I don't think there's too much new updates today, other than the fact that I'm very excited for the PlayStation 5 coming out, and I just ordered Pikmin 3 on the Switch, so hopefully that gets here soon. I've been waiting like 3 years for that because nobody bought a Wii U. So yeah, that's my news for now. Be sure to let me know how you guys are doing as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.